Hello. Oh, that does work. Okay. All right. Good morning, everyone. Hope you're all doing well this morning. So today we have our second keynote speaker we're very excited about, and I am excited to introduce her. So Ani Chroni is a professor in sports psychology, pedagogy, and sports coaching with the Department of Sports and Physical Education at Inland Norway University of Applied Sciences. She possesses extended transnational experience in academia, research, sports psychology consulting, as well as with sport and action-based organization advocacy for gender equality. Her research work has developed within two areas: psychological welfare of performers and elements of performance enhancement for athletes and coaches. She has employed qualitative and quantitative methods to explore the elite athlete to coach transition, which she'll be talking about today, elite coach stress and organizational support, sexual harassment in sport, athlete self-talk, cognitive hardiness, competitiveness, and on-site coping. So a broad array of different areas. Ani is the leader of the Sport and Social Sciences Research Group for her institution. As an applied practitioner, she has worked since 1997 with many different sports levels and cultures, and has been a certified consultant for ASP and the Hellenic Society of Sports Psychology. She is also certified as a coach developer by the NSSU Academy. So please join me in welcoming Ani Chroni.
Good morning. Yes, you can hear me. I'm not going to stand up here. I'm short enough. If I hide behind this, you won't see anything. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, the ICCE, for the invitation. Thank you all for being here. And I'm really excited to share the work that we've been doing, the work that we've been developing on the athlete to coach transition. Is it possible to have the slides, please? Technical director is there. So I will start with reminding us what elite athlete retirement can mean. That I did not do. Can I use this, please? Only me? Okay. I'm good. I'm Chris. Yeah. Sparks wrote that the onset of a transition where athletes descend from the heights of the extraordinary to the mundane world of ordinariness. And it's a big truth for elite athletes that we're going to look in today, and this transition that some of them undergo into coaching. This can be a hard truth. It can be a wonderful truth, but it can also be a hard truth. Going from being the center of attention to really becoming a common person. At the same time, transition is a process. It's a process over time. And this over time can take long. It's a process of phases. It can take months. It can take years for some people, that as they move in, through, and eventually out of the transition. Quite a few years ago, about 10 years ago, I was working with a polo player, and he was getting older. As polo players, they're lucky that they can play quite long. They can be 30s, 40s, even early 50s sometimes at a high level, considering the horse is the one doing most of the running. But the end was approaching as he was getting mid 40s. And for about 2 years, I was trying to discuss with him some of the things, to look forward. But for 2 years, retirement, it was a forbidden word. It was impossible to ever start with that and have a discussion. So it is interesting how, this transition in their retirement, it changed a lot. It changes them, changes relationships, routines, the roles, assumptions about transition. The last 2 years, right before I moved from Greece to Norway, I was working with a team, and as I started working with a team, I realized that there were some challenges there. And the challenges were not really with the athletes, but with a coach. The coach that I was working with them in 2012 and 2013. But in 2010, the coach had retired. On early April, had his last race. And in May, he started coaching. At that point, when he started coaching, he was coaching at a local club. He didn't have any coach education when he took the job. He had his athletic experience, something quite common around the world. I met with them. I knew him as an athlete, but in terms of a professional relationship, that started in 2 years when he was in his coaching career. But it was still, as he would say, very difficult to stand midway of the course when he was fit, strong, and he still knew his FIS points were count. It was very difficult to fight the urge to attack a slalom, miss the action, the training, and racing for myself. Accept that athletes cannot correct their mistakes as fast as I could. A lot of the challenges were about how he would feel things, how he could do things, he would want to do things, and how things were happening on these people that were outside. So it was, for me, this was the onset of this research line, this work outside. And at that point, I realized that we did not have enough knowledge when it comes to this transition. There was already enough enough research on the athlete retirement. We go back, we had in sport, when we left looking at it only as an event and borrowing from different sciences. I think, if I'm not mistaken, Bruce Ogilvy and Jim Taylor was that first model of athletic career. And then Natalia Stambulova, Paul Willeman, quite a few have done a lot of work in this area of retirement and transition. But not on this one. There's a lot programs in helping them transfer their skills into other professional arenas. But here, whoa, transfer what skills? Yeah, my skills are right here, right there. They can be used. However, I realized that this was really a transition that we had not looked on. And at some point, I had this interesting conversation and comment from a coach at that time. I remember how it was going from being the flower to being the gardener. And that was the nicest metaphor I've heard since I started doing this work. Johan was very right. He went the same. Atlanta 96 was his last Olympic Games. He went into coaching right after. Luckily, he had an education in sports sciences. The coach that I was working did not have. 2 years later, he stepped out and did go get his coaching education. And he was fast-tracked. He did go through coaching education at the French alpinism, at the French Alpine School. And to get accepted, he used his athletic achievements. So he was fast-tracked in that route. Things are not so straightforward. We think it is. We have the experience. I did the same. I stopped competing and I coached the very next year. I coached for 3 years in Greece and 1 year here in the US. And then I stopped because I was getting confused between the sports psychology role and the coaching role. However, quite many, whether some have reached high levels or, just participation, doesn't matter, they do go into coaching. However, coaching is complex. This is a coaching conference. A lot of you, I believe all of you, realize the complexity of coaching, how much it requires, the knowledge, the understanding that it requires. And previous athletic experience does not guarantee success. Oh my God, does not even guarantee that you're going to be a good coach, a coach that kids, your athletes will remember and talk about you. Elite athletes at the same time, where they are not very often, they're not ready, or they don't have the time to think about the next phase. Or sometimes they have coaches that don't want them to think about the next phase and would like them to focus on the here and now where they are training and competing. So there can be some challenges from different ends about this upcoming transition. Excuse me. We have some research, not a lot, but we do have some research right now, and we start building some understanding in this elite athlete to coach transition, coming from a learning perspective, coming from a psychological perspective, from sociological perspective. It is interesting because coming from different perspectives helps us see the bigger picture and helps us look at things from different angles and consider different parameters. Early on, Stephen Reen from Australia looked at fast tracking. Fast tracking is this common practice where it happens in different ways in different countries. Basically, we allow elite athletes to go in to have some minimum coaching education. Sometimes, as who was it yesterday? We were in a group together from 8 courses, getting one, complete one. Or like the coach that I was working, he skipped 2 years. Similar thing can happen in Norway. You start instead from level 1 coach education, you can start from level 3. If you're hired for a national team, you can start with top coach education, which is a program only for national team coaches, and maybe have skipped 1, 2, 3, 4. So it can happen on different ways. And it does provide a toolbox. It does provide some knowledge. However, we see that maybe quite a lot of other really necessary knowledge is missing. And what Reen did, looked at a coach who was fast-tracked and a coach that had developed in the traditional pathway from tier to tier, from different level to level of getting education. And it was interesting to find that, well, they have excellent sports skills, technique knowledge. However, they could struggle teaching fundamentals, skill progression. They would struggle to care for the developing youth athletes. There is a lot of that is covered in earlier levels of education. Also, fast track athletes, they encounter multiple challenges, and the expectation for which the athlete experience does not prepare. So knowing the sport is really not enough. A little bit on the why and how. On the why, some retiring athletes, they do want to go into coaching. They have this avid interest to go into coaching. Makes sense. And many of them at that point, they choose to take this, what Alex Blackett would call the active preparation approach, where they will take education during their athletic career. We have a lot of dual career programs around the world where either athletes will have a profession and their career, or they will be getting education and their career. So there can be an interest. Sometimes they are just invited, they're recruited, they're headhunted. Nothing else to do, no other plan, no better plan. And for some is that they don't want to go. They're not ready to leave sport yet. They want to stay in that element. So there are two, most commonly we talk about pathways, the fast track and the traditional step-by-step education pathway. And then we have people who will actively prepare and those who will passively wait until they get there. Interestingly, destinations of first coaching role. Athletes who go into coaching, and this is from research in rugby and football in UK, they tend to either go back to the very first club for which they played for, or the last club that they played for. So it is the known, either the beginning of the athletic career or the end of the athletic career. There are too many assumptions. The biggest assumption that we make is you played, therefore you can coach. But there is more that we assume. There is more that we assume either as educators, there are more that those who recruit, who hire the coaches assume. You have the lifestyle. You know you have the feel, you know the lifestyle, you know us. Athletes will want players will want to play for you, or they will respect you. You will get their respect much easier. However, the transition that we're talking about today does hide some really distinctive demands. There are barriers, and it does require resources. It does require adjustment, reconstructions for the person's identity, for the person's practices, for the person's beings and doings. We managed to put this idea that yes, there is an event happens, but there's also an experience. And if you know some of the research that looked on transitions in the early stages, we looked at it as an event, but we are now beyond that. We are beyond trying to take a more holistic approach to this. So we really, our focus is on the experience. And as an event, we will describe it when the person transits from training and competition realm into the training and competition realm of the same sport, now as a coach. That's the event. The experience, or one of the experience that can be described, is going from being the expert, because an elite athlete at that time before retirement is an expert in his sport, and now have to redevelop feelings of competence and self-worth as a novice coach. You're going from the expert to being the novice. A couple of years ago, I was supervising a young sports psychologist, and we had a discussion. There was an incident after a Sunday soccer game. It was, U16 or U18, a national team. The coach was a new coach. He had just started coaching 2 months ago out of his retirement as a professional football player. And the game didn't go well. So there was really a lot of harsh discussions after the game. And one of the things that the coach started saying, "You're ruining my name." What name? What name was he referring to? He had just been coaching for 2 months. Do you have a name as a coach in 2 months? No, he was referring to his professional career, his player career. But that's not what he was. That's not what he was asked to do there. That's not who he should have been or what he should be doing at that point of time. This is a PhD. It's one of the first studies really that we have, particularly looking into this transition, looked at the transition of 3 tennis players in Australia. And Kavanaugh identified some challenges, barriers, and facilitators. All 3 of them transited without any formal pre-retirement planning. Only they had done some part-time coaching. A lot of elite athletes might do some part-time coaching. Sometimes in Norway right now, some federations require, when they have breaks in the summer, that they go and coach in some of the youth teams, so they get some experience. Or they offer possibilities for them to get education during their elite years. Also, as barriers, she identified athlete experience did influence their coaching perspective. And they felt that they were she identified that they were stuck in the same environment, doing the same things day in, day out, as in their life during their athletic career. Interestingly, the motivation that they had to become and achieve as coaches was related to how they did as athletes, to their previous athletic life. It was not a renewed motivation, but it was, a continuation of what was going on before. And yes, skills, experiences that they had transferred even feelings of competence and self-worth from that previous life, had not developed new one. In 2013, as I mentioned, it was presented in 14, but it was done 2012 and 13 when I was still in Greece, looked at this coach, and the challenges he talked about was finding a new motivation. It was difficult for him to find any motivation. Lacking coaching education, feeling sidelined when feeling fit and strong, accepting that not everyone is cut out to be a champion, controlling, emotional regulation when there were athletes racing and he could not have control of how they would perform. And as in the Kavanaugh cases, or in this one, or the next ones that I will share with you from Norwegian early career coaches, transiting to the new role was considered easy. It's always like when you first start the discussion in the interviews, it's like, oh, that was easy. Oh, it went smooth, it went fine. You need to start talking more and more and dig with questions further for them to start thinking that, oh yeah, that happened and that was not so easy, or that challenged me. So the athletic experience, knowing the sport and knowing the lifestyle, because elite sport and coaching is a lifestyle, makes it easy. When we looked at winter sports in Norway, I need to keep track of time. We organized the data. We initially identified some themes, looking in, how and why they exited the athletic career. Some of them, it was time, the time was right. Other ones started not doing so well, so they wanted to end. And there were also injury cases. So it was different reasons. And why coaching, as I said in one of the previous slides, some wanted to become coaches. Others were just invited. Others were headhunted. So it was different things. Others, it just happened. They really didn't know how it happened, but it happened. Then we identified that there was this theme that we found that we call this no longer and not yet, where, there were athletes and now they're coaching, and well, what does it mean to coach and what is a good coach? So it was this being in limbo in space and time for them, and challenges in the transition and facilitators. And I've shared some. It was no different from what Kavanaugh found or what I had found in the Greek study. When we finished, I had an interesting conversation with Natalia Stambulova, and she urged me to go back and take another look and reanalyze the data. Take another look and try to bring together the context, also in a way with the chronology. And we came up with this model that has 3 phases: the career shift. So in a way, it's the exiting and entering themes, the re-identification phase, and the professional development. And each of these phases has demands, has barriers, and does require resources, does require both internal resources, but also external resources would be very valuable. So looking here in this career shift, dealing with injury and emotions, accepting the end, stepping out without a plan or working towards a plan. In the re-identification, stepping into the new. It's new, it's unstructured, is unknown. Some of them are aware that, oh, their coaches work long hours, but some of them were surprised of the demanding hours of coaching, how their coaches would have to, go out 2 hours before they would show up, the athletes would show up to practice, just to get everything ready for them. So it's interesting that for some of them, the workload was a surprise. The difficulty to leave the athlete life behind, unresolved feelings. Some were still angry of things, needing distance. So what we found out is that really these 3 phases, it's not a linear progression. That's what we saw. Some of them would take a step from the career shift, would go in the longer and not yet, will even take a step in the professional development and then go back again. There is one of the athletes we interviewed in the first data set. When we interviewed him, he was working as a coach, and he was actually in a dual career, in the Olympic Training Center dual career program. The athlete stayed in this dual career program for 6 years. He was going out of the athletic career into coaching, back into competing, training, and competing again. In a year and a half, out again, back again. So we see that it doesn't mean that once you make the decision, it's a straight road. As I mentioned, there was this polo player that I took him through retirement. It's one of the few times that as a sports psychologist, I took someone all the way through retirement, because usually federations or clubs stop paying. And he retired. He retired at the end of the day. He retired from high goal polo 3 weeks ago, and he kept playing low goal polo. 3 weeks ago, finally, I received an email that he's out. He had two really nasty falls, and 3 months ago had a hip replacement. So now it's the time that really had to decide. So as you see, this transition out of sport can take long, and we keep going back and forth. Yes, most often the transition, at least as we managed to see in the Norwegian context, had little to no formal preparation. Or the phases and demands, the surprise, and it does have a profound effect in the person and who he or she is, in their behaviors, in their relationships, everything. My career plans had never included coaching. I once told my coach it would be the last job I would ever do. He, the head coach, asked me one day during land training, and I snapped back before he even finished asking. No way, not me. I'll be done with swimming when I finish competing. As it turned out, I retired from swimming earlier than expected and accepted a head coach role at my home club. It filled the void, and I absolutely love the fact that they asked me. This idea that it filled the void, it's a long one. It's one that we see keep coming back. It's actually something that I think goes back to 2006, a publication of David Lavallee that actually talks about this, that it fills the void. Going from training and competing into coaching, it fills the void. Here is some other words describing this career shift to going from career shift to re-identification. My entry into coaching was almost as abrupt and unexpected as the end to my athletic career. The offer to coach came from a friend 3 months after my decision to leave sport. I thought about it for 2 weeks and accepted. It was a hard year because I was still struggling with facing the end of my athletic career. I did not watch any World Cup races on TV, did not look at any results. It was too close. After 5 months of coaching, I knew I had to step away from the sport for a while. This first effort at coaching was just too soon after the end of my career. I had been very invested as an athlete. I wasn't ready at the time to invest at helping others to go after their dreams when I was still mourning the loss of mine. This particular early career coach, we interviewed him when he was a coach, as that was when we interviewed him. It was the second episode of coaching, going into coaching. He mentioned for the first one at some point. And then there was a third one. And unfortunately, the third one, he got fired for being involved in a drinking incident during competition. So what we see that it's not as easy as we think it is. Definitely, there are some great stories, and there are some transitions that go quite well, and they don't require interventions or they don't require so much support. But not all transitions are straightforward. While athletic experience, coaching education, and brief coaching experience gave me a startup toolkit, communication between coach, athlete, and parents can be frustrating and difficult. It is easy to complicate things, say too much. You observe everything, but you need to manage your words. You must set boundaries, and that all have a clear understanding, so we all speak the same language. It may sound simple, but I think we all know that communication is a very basic component of coaching. Communication, relating, building relationships. So how much you say, what you say, it's very different. And if you think that this particular one had athletic experience, had been through coaching education, and had some brief coaching experiences. But still, the challenge was there. It was very different. Remember what we said, there may be 8 courses and you have to take only 1, or some take only 3. There is some education that is left out in the remaining courses that someone never took. And it could be, whether it's ethics or communication, could be in those ones. We looked into how federations recruit, because it does happen. It's not only the clubs, the teams that recruit their players to come back as coaches, federations do it too. And I think you realize from a research perspective, it is a lot easier to access and reach federations and find who is the person responsible and involved for some years in recruiting, hiring, than start looking that around clubs. So that's what we did. And we looked at 10 different federations. And they look at a few different things. One, they want that the person has some kind of essential coaching elements. And under that would be knowledge of the sport, some professional and international skills. Coaching education is very much desired. If not, at least in Norway, then they're going to support the person to get the education. They get hired and they will get the education along the line. And hopefully coaching experience. International skills, it's interesting. Norway is a great country, and by now a lot of people know how successful Norway has been in the last few Winter Olympics. But at the same time, it's a country that is far up. And so the international experience of, the life, the athlete life, and what a coach does and how everything works is critical. They also want the person to have some personal attributes that show that, early in their athletic career, and looking at, taking initiative, really caring to learn and how things develop and how things get better. Leadership, compassion, definitely love for the sport. They were also wanted that they would have a singular dedication to the sport. And for that is to know that coaching would be their priority. And we even had one really harsh quote talking about that they would check the partner, that they would be the right person who would allow for coaching to be a priority. And of course, they would like to know these individuals well from the time they were athletes. Alex Blackett in the UK, in his work and his research with professional football and rugby players, did not find much different things. And Alex's work comes in from a sociological perspective. They hire from within their system to ensure a level of familiarity, not only with the sport, but also with a particular leadership system. And the athletic background, they believe that it gives them respect faster. And also they're more trusted to reproduce team climate. Fast track athletes are preferred. So what we saw in the Norwegian research, where they look that they have the elements, that they know them from early, that they can bring in what they need. At some point, we were in a meeting with 13 federations after we had completed some research projects and discussing on how they do things and how are they planning maybe to incorporate some of this new data. And as we were listening to different people from 13 different federations in Norway, and Sigurd is sitting next to me, we have this piece of paper and we start kind of taking notes. And this is a photo, as you saw, I typed some words so you can read our handwriting. It started with a central part. From one end, we have the federation. From the other end, we have the athlete. Well, at that point, for the federation, the organization is the comfort zone. And for the athlete, being the elite athlete, who he or she is their comfort zone. The new comfort zone then, between the two of them, becomes the athlete who turns into a coach. But that, it means, and it's a new comfort zone because it keeps the home intact for the federation. From the athlete end, they're staying home. And we see there some continuation, repetition, reproduction of things. Culture and keeping the culture they're working is critical. So as Sigurd noted down, is like kids never leave home. Coaching is complex and is a lot more than fixing things for athletes. I have a short video of Sigurd and his experience. Sigurd is my colleague or collaborator with Kristen Diffenbach, and he was one of the great Norwegian ski jumpers. Won the Four Hills tournament, retired in 2010, and a few months later, he was the coach for the US women's team in ski jumping.
Hi, my name is Sigurd Pettersen. I'm a former ski jumper, did compete on a quite high level. That was also the reason I was given the opportunity to coach on a quite high level right after my career. During my active career, I did educate myself to become a coach, but I was not finished going into the coaching role. My experience from the transition was that my embodied knowledge, which I also felt was my strongest side going into the coaching role, was hard to translate to my athletes. In a way, I didn't have the tools, theory, or enough experience as a coach to aid me translate my embodied knowledge and fully use that resource into the coaching role. But that also, the lack of tools and theory and experience made me do the mistake I think many of us do, becoming a coach, and that is to try to fix the athletes' problems instead of learning them the difference between failure and success, and give them skills for the future. Yeah, that's my story and that's my experience. Hope you all have a nice day. Bye-bye.
That's Sigurd Pettersen. And whenever we go at the Olympic Training Center, the story is everybody wants to take photos with him. And I keep complaining, nobody wants to take a photo with me. Everybody wants to be photo. So it's not fixing things for athletes. It is teaching them how to fix things. And to do that, we need to be able to translate our knowledge, what we can do, how I can ski or how he could jump or how you can shoot, into how they can do it. And they're different persons, they're different bodies, they're different. And it's not easy for some people to actually take that step and get out of the me into you or they or we or whatever they would like to call it. This transfer of the embodied experience into actually teaching it, coaching it, developing is difficult. So the need is really to meet transition demands, sometimes in the fastest time possible, because some make the shift literally overnight. They retire and they start coaching. Other ones take time, but still, if they have not worked on it, the elements are going to be there. And actually to meet the transition demands from multiple ends, which to the untrained eye looks easy. And the untrained eye can be all our eyes if we have not sat down and reflected on it, if we have not realized what it takes. Why care? For many reasons. It is difficult to adapt to life after elite sport. I'm going to say again, there are some great transitions, ones that are smooth, easy, but there are a lot of challenging ones. A couple of years ago, the national TV station in Norway did a survey of retired Olympic game athletes, and they answered a survey about, it started with physical health problems, and they identified that a lot of the retired athletes did have physical health problems, but also they ask some questions on mental health problems, depression, anxiety, drugs, betting. Yes, I think it was betting. And there were some issues there too. And we know that the literature out there, we do see the challenges in that adaptation to life after elite sport. Right now we have increased concerns about mental health, mental well-being and ill-being of athletes and finally coaches. We are paying attention to coaches. And definitely there's room to improve. Room to improve when it comes to coaching. Yeah, self-care. I'm sorry, but I'll put that first before even job security, because we know that coaching is a very insecure profession. You're coach today and you do have a job, and tomorrow you may not have a job. Contracts disappear overnight. And a lot of them are part-time, volunteers, don't work with contracts. Work-life balances or work-life harmony. So there definitely room where we can help things improve. There's room to improve coaching practice. Someone who, one of the things that we were paying attention, but we did not push further while we were doing some of the interviews, was that we had some of the athletes who left because of an injury, and it was career-ending injuries. So while they were talking in their interview, they were actually mentioning the word safety a lot more than other people that we interviewed. So there is a lot. Does that person who will go into coaching, who has had a really challenging injury experience, a career-ending injury, is he or she going to coach differently? How things are going to happen there? So coaching practice can be impacted by previous experience too. Improve care in sport, care of the athlete. Now I'm stepping out of the coach, care of the athlete. And definitely always room to improve development of athletes in sport. So there are a lot of reasons. Unfortunately, this transition from elite sport to coaching and can transfer some outdated, incorrect, harmful coaching practices too. There is a recent publication about the swim coach from Australia who did perpetuate in her coaching career the physical and emotional abuse that she had received as an athlete and had normalized it. So there is a lot that we need to still don't know about and we need to look into. But, coaching the way we were coached, it's definitely questionable. So we do need an alternative way. And we do think that, education, at least maybe it's a moment to pause and critically reflect on how you're doing things, who you are, what you are. They need to go into a job. They need to go into a profession. There are a lot of reasons why some people either choose or are fast track or get this coaching jobs right away. However, education, disruption as learning, we can start thinking about that. And we can see that tertiary study as a disruption. It is something that can create that brief moment where maybe they will start looking at things differently and start bringing some different practices. We need to understand, we miss knowledge. We need to understand the individual that is transiting a lot more than we understand right now. There is some research in UK, there is some research in Australia, there is some research in Greece, there is some research in Norway. There are hundreds of other countries, hundreds of other cultures that do things differently. In Romania, the athletes that retired after Tokyo and previous Olympic Games, they take a break for a couple of weeks and then they get a letter, an invitation to go back and coach, all of them. So there's a guaranteed job once you've been to the Olympics in Romania. Do they know how to coach? Few, yes, other ones, no. What happens is, yes, there is a continuous reproduction of how they were coached. Now they're going to coach. We need to understand the persons and the practices that they do, those who recruit them, who hire them, and eventually those who are their bosses, their leaders, their managers. We need to understand also these processes. Who do they serve? And what do they serve? Do they serve the elite athlete who's transiting? Do they serve the organization who's hiring, the federation who's bringing in? Do they serve in maintaining this home intact? What is the final aim there? And we need really to take a step away from those assumptions. You play, therefore you can coach. And also the idea that having coach education, having completed a coach education program, it means you're ready and you will have, a great transition. It is the identity shift that I'm really more concerned about here. This last semester, I taught this course for the first time. It took us some time with Sigurd to put it together. It's a short course. Here in the US, we would call it a GUT course, but I don't tell that in Norway. 5 credit points, 2 months. And it's a course where definitely it takes 3 things. All of them, they are in a bachelor's in coaching. And all of them are already working as coaches. So it's an online, actually, it started as an online bachelor's program, but now we're going to take the course in the physical presence program too, where the requirement is that they're already coaching. So we want to help those that are older, already coaching and don't have a degree. And there is some literature, but not a lot of literature, to be honest. There is some literature. They have the experiences that they have in coaching. And the biggest, the most important part is the reflection. It's all about reflecting. And we take a stepwise approach where, helping them in the beginning understand that development means change. And change means you're going to be uncomfortable at some point. You're going to be in limbo possibly at some point, something new, something different. And it's there in the beginning where we throw at them a lot about reflection and helping them figure out what it means to reflect, to go beyond the what happened, to go in the so and now what, to reflect on, in, and for. We tend to reflect a lot about things that don't go well, but reflection is not only about that. We can reflect about the best versions of ourselves. So we try to help them play with 3 things at the first step: development, meaning change, and reflection, using the tool of reflection, and also using as a tool Doug Newberg's model of resonance model of performance. Then the next step, spend time to reflect on the self, visit the self. Who am I? So there's always a little bit of literature and then a lot of reflection. There are options for keeping a journal. There are some reflection exercises that they need to do. Then step out of the self and let's go figure out who is the coach. Who is a coach? Who do we call a coach? Who is a coach in alpine? Who is a coach in football? Who is a coach in fencing? Who is a coach in cycling? Okay. What makes a coach? What are the skills? Everything to look around a coach. And on the third step, put the 2 together. Who am I, the coach? Trying to bring in who they are with who the coach is. Then look at work-life balances. Eventually look at, philosophy. Remember, these are already working as coaches, so they have something, a little bit of philosophy. So the idea is, okay, let's revisit, let's look at this philosophy we have with everything we've talked about and we reflected on until now where. And the almost last step is to write their story, to develop their new, their coaching narrative. We learn through stories, and writing stories can be a great way for us to move things forward. There's this book, it's called Redirect, from Tim Wilson at the University of Virginia, where he talks about this process of redirecting our own stories and how it can be used in improving things. And yeah, I call that last step, that's the oral exam at the last step, which is, how did I embrace my change? But that's what it is, because it's another opportunity for them to reflect. The oral exam of the course is a meta reflection of their last reflection note, which happens a month later. After a month, okay, let's go back and revisit. And that's what they present, and then we have discussions in the oral examination. So this is something that we've tried to develop. It all started because of this research on the athlete to coach transition. And at least for the first time, the evaluations were good. In some of the work with the Olympic Training Center, developed these infographics when it comes to helping meet the challenges that the person who undergoes the transition is experiencing. They're occupational, they're personal, they're contextual, and they're relational challenges. We have cases where today you were teammates and today you're the coach at the elite level. We need to help them, support them to develop strategies on how to handle things, how to handle the workload, the travel load from a different perspective, because as you know, some coaches are also travel agents at the same time. So you do quite a few different jobs. Also, from the federation or from the club standpoint, how to support the person. How to support the person when it comes, with the education that they need to, that we need to provide for a stable start. And for a stable start, it could mean help them with their education, help them find a good match, that they're a good fit, the coach with the team that they're going to coach, with the athletes that they're coaching, if that is possible. Okay. Provide this blue book, the handbook, if available. In some sports, it is. In other ones, it isn't. So they really need to figure out their way. Support for professional development, develop their knowledge, and support for holistic well-being. I don't know, maybe that's too Norwegian, but I think that has to be too worldwide eventually. Support for well-being as a whole, the person and the performer. The coach is a person too, and we need to care for the coach. We need more research. We need accounts from coaches who withdrew, who are out of work. I'm planning to do that. One of the people that we interviewed in the very beginning, he was headhunted from a national team athlete to a national team coach. He was actually very smart and very careful. It took a month to decide. He did his research. He found a mentor to support him in the coaching role. He also negotiated with the federation so he would bring in what he believed would be a strong team, to support him in the work as a coach, with assistant coaches, different specialty coaches. Unfortunately, in his very first year, there was quite a lot of turmoil within the team, had no support from the federation. He left, never has come back to coaching. It's been 6 years now. So there are some great stories and there are some tough stories. The very first case that I started with in Greece, he's a coach now for an elite athlete of Australia. And it will be great because it's 10 years now. It's actually 10 years since his retirement. As I said, he started at a local club. He had with the national team. Then he left for about a year to take off to get the education in France. Then he coached in France for some years. Then his wife decided that they should move to Australia. So he tried to leave alpine and coaching. He couldn't. So he came back, coached in France. Now he has coaching an athlete of Australia. With alpine, he's still working in Europe. So it's a story that has gone quite a long path with different experiences, and he's finally stable and he made it. And there are some great coaches out there. The first note that remember how it is from going from being the flower to being the gardener, Johan Flodin. He had an Olympic gold medal at the Paralympics in Tokyo. Plenty of gold medals as from his athletes in world championships as rowing coach. So there are some great careers that can start from this transition, but still there is a lot that we miss, knowledge that we don't know. Absence, we really don't see many para athletes transit into coaching. We also don't see many women. LGBTQ plus, we don't know anything there either. Sub-elite athletes, they also transit. I was never an elite athlete, but I did transit into coaching. That's what with things happening in my club. You would stop, you would go back coaching. That's what my best friend did. That's what I did too. But I was never elite. But we don't know about this transition. It can be, definitely there are some characteristics that can be slightly different. Also, stakeholders, media, fans, sponsors, we don't know. Alternative methodologies, longitudinal study will be great. And yeah, I also mentioned that about support, the support practices, coach developers, education, what their roles can be, what is happening. We do miss all that knowledge. And we have a great outlet to propose. We have this special issue that is running right now. It was announced about 3 weeks ago, and the deadline is a year from now. And it's transition in coaching. Of course, this means it's much wider than this elite athlete to coach transition, because there are a lot of other transitions happening, not only going into coaching, while coaching, or exiting coaching. So there's a lot of knowledge that we're missing, but still for the topic that I covered today, definitely there's a very interesting outlet for us out there, researchers and practitioners. I want to say thank you to Kristen Diffenbach and to Sigurd Pettersen. Without them, I wouldn't be standing here today delivering this keynote. We wouldn't have had the knowledge, the different way to look at the data, the long hours, the long trips for Kristen come to Europe and spend time with us in Norway, going around, leaving 4 o'clock in the morning with her son, 7 years old, in the car so we could drive up to a ski resort, do an interview with a poor kid sleeping on the back of the car or playing while Kristen and me are working. Same thing with Sigurd. He's got 2 small kids, so we juggle around everything. And I do remember Dan Gould, when I was much younger, saying with how went through some of his PhD students while you had your kids young. So I would like to thank my partners and definitely the Olympic Training Center and both my institutions for the support, and also you for being here today. Thank you.
All right. It is 11 o'clock, but we are going to take a couple of questions. If anyone has any burning questions that they would like to ask.
No burning questions.
I can bring you the microphone.
Oh, God.
For the
Trouble.
Zoom.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Ani, for a wonderful presentation. I was curious about, in part, you said the void, and it triggered some of my thoughts, but I was curious about maybe some athletes that partially transition. In other words, maybe they get out of their sport and then they start to get into coaching, and then they realize that there's a whole nother world or dimension that they hadn't even really considered as an athlete, and try to get back into the athlete. So maybe they become a player coach of some sort. I was wondering if you had encountered any of those types of situations.
a lot of them are my students. They are still fully active in their sport and they're studying as coaches. And but in the cases we have interviewed, we don't have data to answer your question, Chris. So that's another void there that we need more. In those that are still, you know, they're playing and they're coaching and they're doing both this kind of a dual role. So it is very common, very common. Most of my students, whether it was in Greece or here in US or in Norway, they are active still in their sport and they coach. And some of them are sometimes coaching or have assistant coach roles within the team they're playing. So I really don't understand how can you do that, train for yourself and coach a little bit, but it is.
Okay, any other questions? We'll take this last one and then I'll give you a couple of updates.
Well, first off, thank you for the fantastic presentation. So I'm curious as to where this idea of like a forced retirement versus like retirement as a choice fits into this whole transition.
Okay. A forced retirement. Forced retirement would be injury. Okay. It would be you're cut from the team, or forced retirement. Either you were cut from the team, or in one of our cases, he realized that it was the end of an era, and he, in a way, he had to stop. The results were not coming. So it does come on how prepared they are. And you saw that quote, the athlete that talked about that he was mourning the loss of his dream, and he was not ready to invest on helping someone else with their dreams. Actually, it was an injury issue behind.
Gotcha.
There was a chronic injury behind, which, according to how you say it, it had to do with really poor coaching. So it does fit in that career shift, and the model fits in the career shift on how everything starts. Still, though, it doesn't mean that if it's a choice, like some of them, it was a choice, but still the transition, if not prepared, is very different.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
All right, please join me in thanking Ani again for the insightful keynote. And just a couple of reminders. So the critical conversation for this keynote will be at 12:15 back in this room. Back in this room. I thought that was me. And we no longer, unfortunately, have the, I want to pronounce this right, Kalispel tribe, doing their demonstration due to the death of an elder. And I think everyone probably received that message through Hoover. So lunch will now be at 12:30, also in here. And thank you all for coming.